just what you want to do. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you.
I think Kristen deserves another round of applause for that great presentation. And I would call her a driven leader. She drove in last night and she's driving back this evening for a presentation by her new boss tomorrow morning about the new cultural plan and the economy. So I have a few announcements to make. I believe the sun is shining. Rich said that it was going to start, the rain would stop by 4 o'clock. We are running a little bit late, but we will allow this Rogues Gallery to present, I think what is going to be a very interesting discussion about public-private partnerships and alliances. There'll be time for questions, and then, of course, it's time for the reception over at the Liberty Fine Art Gallery. Your maps, I believe, in your programs on the, Mary, maps outside in their bags, maps to walk, and then it's art, it's Thursday night, first Thursday, Art Walk Reno. So enjoy the sun, enjoy what Reno has to offer. There's art everywhere. Rather than taking a lot of time introducing my colleagues here at the table, I'm just going to ask them to introduce themselves quickly and introduce this panel as the beginning of an exploration of something that we all are engaged in, how developing partnerships, they may be called collaborations. The word of the month in our agency is alliances. It seems to have more of an active sense than either partnership or collaboration, and how the definition of public and private may change for an environment, for a city, for a county. But someone's calling me anyway. But it's something. Really. But it's something that it's very important that we all work on, and it could be very small, it could be very large. And with that, the panelists today are Jim Bradley, who has been Salt Lake County, first a county commissioner, chair of the commission, director of energy for the state of Utah. Now you're called a councilman. They changed their system of government in Salt Lake County. We have Barbara Mackey. Many of you may know Barbara. She is the executive director of the Historic Fourth Ward School Museum in Virginia City. And then sitting next to me is my colleague, our board member, Eric Strain, who is an architect, and he is dedicated to his field, his community, and to the connection between art, space, design, and livability in Las Vegas. So we're going to start with Jim's presentation, and if you want to say a few words about what you're doing, why you're here, or if you just want to jump right into your presentation.
All right, I'll begin. And we're time limited, all right. I would like to join the chorus though, but Kristen's speech today I thought was just absolutely terrific in terms of leadership and well-deserved applause. Except for one part where remember the part where she was talking about Susan and all the accolades she presented? Susan and I go way back, and when we talk about partnerships and alliances, we also talk about coalitions. And Susan was charged with putting together and making it work our Performing Arts Coalition in Salt Lake County. And if I recall, Susan, you're looking for a smile here, now come on. It was very trying, and it tried her patience, and it was a challenge to get the performing art groups to work together. So when you're talking about partnerships, you got to start at the base. And luckily, we were successful over time. But at the beginning, there was jealousy, there was greed, there was all of the natural human elements that came to play. But you have to start with the arts groups themselves, and they have to have an alliance, they have to be partners, they have to have that coalition. And once you've gotten past that, a lot of more things are possible. The creative process is what is the nut of the whole thing. We have artists who are creative, and it's the challenge of governments and others in the communities to be able to cultivate that artistic instinct, but also to make sure that we can present it to our constituents, to our fellow neighbors, to the citizens in your locality. Without a way to present art, it doesn't do us a whole lot of good. And so I want to go through today, and I'm going to do a quick dog and pony of what we've been able to accomplish in Salt Lake County. And I'm very proud of what we've been able to do, but it's not because of any one individual. First of all, it's because we have a tremendous amount of artistic talent in the state. And one of the reasons we have that, and I'm remiss in not saying this, is that the local culture in Utah, being predominantly the LDS Church, the Mormons, from the day one have put a high value on artistic expression and culture. The very first building in Salt Lake County was music hall, where people would gather and dance and play music and everything else. The very first structure, that's how important it was to them. But going from that, that gave us, that gives Salt Lake County and the state of Utah, that's ally in terms of getting things done. But nevertheless, you have all kinds of other restrictions. Politics, people not wanting, particularly in the West, to spend tax money, all kinds of challenges in terms of putting together money, in the real sense, to be able to present the art that exists there. So I'm going to run through and show how we have developed public and private partnerships that work for us, and I really do believe will work for any community in some fashion or another. And this is going to be a brief look at Salt Lake County. Here are some of our venues. This is the Capitol Theater, which is where we show our Broadway shows that come through. It is also right now the home of the Utah Ballet West and the Utah Opera. They're the resident presenters there, as well as the Broadway shows. It's about 16, it says 1,800 seats, but we're taking that down to 16 to make them much more comfortable, and we're replacing it with something else too. It'll still provide that benefit to the community, and that is county-owned and operated. This is our Bravenel Hall, county-owned and operated, where our Utah Symphony plays. And we have other events there, but that's their home as well. This is the Rose Wagner, which was really a tremendous effort in terms of putting together a smaller venue where particularly our modern dance groups would be able to perform, and other smaller groups who didn't need 1,600 seats, and you didn't want to have a show there and have only a third of them filled up. This has a 500 seat theater, several black box theaters separate from that, and a nice lobby and a nice reception area. But the capacity here is just perfect for a lot of those smaller groups. And we have resident groups that this is their home, owned and operated by the county, and fits perfectly that need. This is what we would call, in a sense, we're duplicating this throughout the county, regional theaters, because other areas in our community want that as well and don't always want to go down to Salt Lake City to do it, even though they're all in the county. I mean, they want their own. Everybody wants their own, and we try to accommodate. This is an art museum we have. It's operated by a nonprofit, but we own it. And this is a new theater where it's in the process of being built. It's just a magnificent piece, and this will be the housing the Broadway theaters when they come by. This will be 2,500 seats, more conducive to getting those Broadway shows sooner than 10 years out. You know, you get them 3 or 4 years out if you have enough seats. So it's a beautiful facility, very expensive, but we pulled it off. And I'm going to go back now and tell you kind of how we did this in terms of partnerships. This is, yes. Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County in a joint partnership. This is in Salt Lake City. They have 60% of it, we own 40%, and we also get paid by the city to operate the facility because we know how to operate these, and we also wanted to make sure, we told them we would only be a partner if they allowed us to operate, to make sure with another stage in the valley, or in the county, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to hurt the other performing arts groups because of the competition. And if we can manage stages, the 3 main stages we have in Salt Lake, we can balance that out to make sure nobody's hogging the time in the wrong time, that we have venues being able to perform when appropriate and where appropriate. So it was important to us to manage the flow of performing arts. And so that was our, we'll help you bet, this is the deal. And they pay us to do that. The Salt Palace, the Rose Wagner, which is that smaller venue, a partnership, a wealthy individual, Izzy Wagner was his name, was born on this site. He sold newspapers when he was a kid, very, very poor, but grew up to own a boxing company that was worth an absolute fortune. In his older years, he wanted to honor his mother, and who loved dance and the arts, and so he made the land available and made a significant donation if the county would build the venue, and that was the 500-seat theater, and we named it after his mother, and it's been just an absolute success. It's booked every day. I mean, you cannot, you know, it's just, we need more, and we're building more. But a partnership, and I'm going to explain how those work. And right next to the Capitol Theater, and I don't have a slide of it, Ballet West, which performs here at the Capitol Theater, built a significant building right next door. And they did it with private donations and with Salt Lake County's help. It provides studio space, a teaching venue, and a beautiful lounge and reception area that ties into the Capitol Theater. And this was done in a partnership between private foundations and philanthropists and Salt Lake County. We came in both at the same amount. Oh my, I'll have it somewhere, right? It was about $7-8 million each. Plus we used another partnership with the federal government through market tax credits, new market tax credits, and I'll explain a little about that, but that was absolutely significant in being able to do that. Okay, I've rambled a lot about our facilities, and now I'm going to hopefully try to tie it together and what Susan wants me to do. None of this is possible without money. I mean, let's just face it. You've got to have money to build the venues, you've got to have money to keep them going, and you have to be able to staff them. And that takes money. And you also have to have performing arts groups that have a source of revenue that's dependable. And what we were able to do in Salt Lake County over the last 15-20 years is put together multiple sources of revenue. Salt Lake County itself, out of its general fund, which we gather from people just through property taxes, it puts about $7 million into arts and culture every year. And that comes in the way of building maintenance, paying salaries, other types of things of county employees, because we own and operate those buildings. There's an associated cost to all of that. But what we were able to do too, and this is an important one, we rebuilt our convention center, and we did that in 1993-94. And we didn't have a way to really pay for it. We wanted a bond, but we had to have money to pay back the bond. And so we got the legislature to pass what we call our Tourism, Recreation, Convention, and Cultural taxes. And what that was, it was a tax on prepared food. Anybody who bought a meal in Salt Lake County had 1% tacked onto their bill. And that 1% was our prepared food tax, and that generates today about $23 million a year. We also, with that, had a portion, the transient room tax increased by, I believe, about a 1.5%, and that went into this fund, as well as adding on to the car rental tax. And so we were able to generate out of that $36 million annually this year, of which about 11 or 12 was dedicated exclusively to the arts and culture. Now, tourism, recreation, convention, culture. Now, here's where the partnership, the alliance, the coalition all plays together. What drove this was the need to pay for our new convention center. And it wasn't because of a great love for the arts. It wasn't necessarily, well, it wasn't. It just wasn't. You know? But we saw an opportunity. And the individual who kind of led this up, a private citizen who was president of Sinclair Oil and was very well respected and had juice at the state legislature, and also was chairman of the board of the Utah Symphony at the time, who was desperate, as they always are, for money. We said, well, look, we can do the convention because we have to do that, but let's throw in tourism and recreation while we're at it, and culture, and broaden that up to broaden the appeal of this particular tax. The majority going to pay off the convention center, but we were able to get that through the state legislature, which enabled Salt Lake County, through an optional sales tax, to implement this tax. And it's been a godsend. The convention center is paid for, but this tax remains. And so it's extremely important to us in terms of being able to not only deal with the arts and culture, and it's more, and that would be more for the building and the not programming as much as just building and maintenance and deferred maintenance. But that's extremely important, as the architect will tell us, that you can build a building, but you also have to keep it up over time, and that's expensive. Now, another revenue source that has just come on the scene lately, and I know very little about, other than it was very good, are the new market tax credits. There are people out there who know about them a lot more than I do, and I would suggest, if you're interested, to find one of them, usually bankers or lawyers. But what that does really is you can form a nonprofit entity in an area if that area is approved by the federal government by zip code for its affordable housing needs. It's all based on a community's need for affordable housing. But if you do, you're eligible for these new market tax credits. And what that means is, as a nonprofit, you don't need a tax credit because you're a nonprofit. But you can sell those now to a bank or a big company or anybody else who does need tax credits, and you get cash for that. I mean, I know, who gets it? But anyway, we did it. It's very complicated, and I don't want to pretend that I know any more than that, because I don't. But going back to our new ballet building, where we had the private interest put in half the money, the county put in half, and we were still short a significant amount. The new market tax credits made up the difference. So there's one more way. You can partner with anybody to get the money. Now, the last one is the Zoo Arts and Parks, and this is the one that I think would probably interest you the most. Once again, it wasn't a convention center this time. It was simply to save the Utah Symphony, which is a terrific symphony, but was having hard times, as I said. We, large number of musicians that want to be paid full time, and they deserve it. And so you have to come up with some way of doing that. Once again, because certain private interests thought it was important, we were able to put together what we call our Zoo Arts and Parks tax. And what this is a sales tax, once again, a county option, and we can, on all sales, charge 1/10%, and that will go to the Zoo Arts and Parks. Now, all of those things I've been talking about are important with partnerships, but this probably shows it better than anything. We first tried to pass that in 1994 when I was on the commission, and it was only at that time for the symphony and art, and it failed. So then we got smart and we said, well, what do people care about? Well, they care about their parks, their recreation centers, and they love the zoo. So we added all those on, said Zoo Arts and Parks, and it passed 2-1. Uh, you know, uh, and then later on, several years later, we added botanical gardens because we have up at the university a beautiful botanical garden in Red Butte Gardens. But that has been just a godsend too. Now the money for this does go to programming, but the public in 1996, when we brought it back, said yes, we like this, and they liked it because we added other things on that we knew they would like, and it increased the support. We always, it's good for 10 years once the public has voted on it. The state legislature had to allow us to do that. They had to authorize the county to put on the ballot a request for this particular tax. It's 10 years, but we always, about 8 years out, go for a reauthorization just in case it fails. We can come back and do it right the next time before it expires. But we haven't had that problem. In 2004, it was reauthorized with 75% of the voters' approval. Now think about that, a tax on sale in a conservative state where the people say, yeah, this is cool. You know, we want to do this, taxes. And they whine a little, well, they don't whine, that's not fair. The restaurant tax, which I talked about earlier, when you think about it, a penny on a dollar and you're eating out, people don't have a lot to argue about there. The Restaurant Association did, but we expected that. That's what they do. So, and also the nice thing about that restaurant tax is it's recession proof. We had very little dip in that during the big recession, which surprised us, but it kept those revenues coming, which were very, very important. Going back to the Zoo, Arts, and Park, we allocate that, we take about half the money, a little more, and give it to the major arts organizations. And I ought to look at my notes and see who they are. We hold the number of major art organizations to 23 who we call Tier 1, who get the bulk of the money. And these are like the symphony, which gets several $1 million, the ballet, a theater, the Natural History Museum. And this is for programming. It's not for building, it's for programming. So this is actually, you know, what pays the art.
It's also for operations.
And yeah, operations and programming and yeah, whatever that entails, but not for building. And then also we have, and this is very, very important, even though it's a much lesser amount, goes to what do we call our Tier 2. And that's, we put about $1.75 million into our Tier 2 organizations, and there's several hundred of those. Now these are like the little city arts councils, like within Salt Lake County, there's 15 cities. And each of those cities has an arts council. And we will give those cities money for their arts council. And, you know, maybe $4,000 or $5,000 is all they need because they're not doing much, or you know, or more if they are. But we spread that money out everywhere, and we fund everything from belly dance groups to you name it through our Tier 2 programs, and it's easier to get into that. The Tier 1 programs, which we hold at 23 major programs, qualify by showing what percent of, it's based on how much they spend on their own operations. If they show that they're spending this much, then they qualify through a ratio of receiving so much from us. Anyway, there's a hierarchy there. The more you spend, the more you get, is what it amounts to, the qualified expenditures. And the rest of that money, and quite a bit, goes to recreation, which builds our parks and our recreation center. And then, of course, the zoo and our aviary get a portion. But that is, the lesson here is, and when you talk about partnerships, they can take all kinds of form. Here we partnered with the zoo, we partnered with parks and rec and other things that we knew people would like, and obviously kept the core culture in there. And those alliances and partnerships can take all kinds of forms. But this is one. It doesn't have to be 1/10 of 1%. It doesn't have to, you know, it can take all types of forms. But to get, and I'll talk about this a little later. But you need an advocate, obviously, with some power, who can plant the seed and then take it to fruition in terms of getting these things achieved. And it does take legislative authority, almost in every state, to have a county implement a tax. and that's where you start, and then you have to have the voters approve of it. And so that's the partnership, that's the alliance that has worked very well for us. Here, this is what I talked about already in terms of who gets the money. We serve under both Tier 1 and Tier 2 performances, a total of about 6 million people a year ago. One of the obligations, if you receive our Zoo Arts and Parks money, is that you have to go out and hold events that people can go to for free, really, not a lot. I mean, it doesn't hurt their bottom line, but it's part of giving back to the public. And also, we're very active within the school system, which is an extremely important part, because the school children, whether they be high school or grade school, get to enjoy a dancer coming to their class and showing them some of the inside of ballet or modern dance or whatever it may be, or the symphony people will come down and work with the kids in their music classes. It really is great. But these are the people that you want to reach, the young kids who are going to grow up and be your audience and hopefully your donors as well. You can't see that, so I don't expect you to. That's the allocation of where we spend that 20, the Zoo Arts and Parks and the big groups. But now, here's where I wanted to go with this too. You know, the various revenue sources that we've been able to put together that work for us. And it could be a combination of the state, the county, the local municipality. The state authorizes us to implement a tax, or they may even come up with some cash, you know, a one-time grant to us for a particular effort. Local municipalities, now nobody's rich on the local level, but for instance, if we want to build a regional theater out in one of the other cities outside of Salt Lake City, they can participate by donating land, for instance. You know, that's as good as cash. You know, they'll make the land available, we'll provide the building. And so there's all types of ways to form those partnerships. And as I said, state, county, and federal, we have the federal tax credits, but also you have the NEA and the Endowment for the Humanities that are approached in the right way, can contribute. And then government, private donations, and foundations. The private donors and the foundations are huge. And you really have, not everybody wants, you know, not every millionaire wants to give their money away. I mean, we know that. And if they haven't, they want to give it away, they don't always want to give it to the arts and culture. They may want to give it to supporting police or fire or something else. But what you really have to do is you have to find those people who are willing to invest. And they'll do it if they think that they're doing it in a partnership, much more than you just say, hey, give me money. And you know, the old adage in raising money is if you go to them and you ask for advice, you may get some money. If you go and ask for money, you'll only get advice. So, you know, you all know that. So, I mean, there's an art to that, and there's people out there professionally who go around and gather that money up. And also the new market and also the renewable energy tax credits can be to your advantage in terms of trying to package together the revenues to make it work. The ballet building, which I talked about, and I have these numbers up here, Salt Lake County put in 17 million, not 7 I said, and the private donations equaled 17. So that's significant from the private sector, $17 million. That included, and this was incorrect, that included the new market tax credits. And how that works, let me just finish the story on new market tax credits. You have to form a nonprofit entity. They're eligible to receive the tax credits. They sell them. That money goes into the general pool to build the building. And in this case, the county, the ownership of the building reverts back to the county after 6 years. It's a technicality. We still basically operate it and do everything else, but in that period, but we'll actually own it in 6 years. And the Eccles Theater, which Salt Lake County, we put in $25 million, plus we operate it, and Salt Lake City put in $60 million, and they did this through their RDA. And we did too. And private foundations came up with $25 million. And obviously one of them was Mr. Spence Eccles and his foundation, because we named it the Eccles Theater for that generosity. Others were very important in that as well. I just wanted to throw this up, excuse me just for a moment. Show some comparisons here between, say, Clark County, Washoe County, and Salt Lake County. I was surprised when I went online and realized that Clark County had 2.6 million people and a budget of $6 billion. But that's a lot of money. But they also operate hospitals and things like that, which we don't do. I know you're telling me it's time's up.
Oh, well, I was, but
yeah, I will.
come back to
Yeah,
the
all I'm going on here is that there's money available through localities, but they can't do it by themselves, and they do need the generosity of the private sector, and they also need not the generosity, but they also be able to manipulate other sources, which usually are governments. And I'm available for answers if you have any questions.
Thanks, Jim. And I was trying to get the attention of another architect in the audience to find out who the architect is.
Brad, who's the architect on the Eccles building?
Yeah, who's the architect on the Eccles building? Caesar Pelli. I believe they did a competition for that, Caesar Pelli. So this is, Jim will be available to talk about not only the mechanisms that and the alliances that are multiple and layered and have gone through, have developed over years and years and years, and then have been just a bump at a cocktail party and finding someone who is interested in supporting these activities. And it's the sorry, I have a mic, but it's a different mic. I'm sorry. So these alliances that occurred in Salt Lake County are ones that have been nurtured. Anybody who has done fundraising knows how you have to nurture your potential and existing donors. But it also had to do with some kind of opportunities, taking opportunities when you met new people or new people came into the community and listened to every idea and bring people together. And the partnership that he was speaking about, the Performing Arts Coalition, it was 4 performing arts groups ranging from the Utah Symphony down to the Folk Dance Underground that we lovingly called Folk Dance Underpants. Because every one of those artists and every one of those groups, and this was for the performing arts, I will say, needed and deserved a place to rehearse and to perform and to invite people in to experience the art form that they loved so much. So these facilities are really quite spectacular. The other element is this Zoos Arts and Parks tax, which we can talk about later if you noticed, and I think the most interesting element is Salt Lake County, obviously the capital of the state, all the major population center with the university. But if you notice, 6 other counties now, with the 20 counties in Utah, have adopted a similar program to support their arts and cultural activities. So it can be done, and there are models there, and we always say it's a remix. It's a remix. If we could go on now to Barbara Mackey to talk about her journey, her story, and the maintenance of a facility as a community asset that Jim alluded to.
Okay. How many of you have been to Virginia City? How many of you have been in the 4th Ward School? Oh my goodness. That is more than I expected. Thank you. Usually I would have brought my stickers with me that say, I'm no dunce, I visited the 4th Ward School. So since we have our dunce hat in the corner. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the building, I just brought up our webpage here just so you could see what happened over time. And the building was constructed in 1876, but I think it was the beginning of private-public partnerships in some ways in Nevada. Of course, there may be other stories, but it now means that the 4th Ward School is the last school standing of its kind in the whole United States. And so I'm going to talk about that journey of the 4th Ward School and a little bit about how lucky my part has been in it. But when it was first constructed, it was a year after the Great Fire of 1875 that destroyed 2/3 of the town. And they were already hunting around for a piece of property to build the high school. And at that time, you only went to 9 grades of school, so high school was 7th, 8th, and 9th. And they had 11 public schools at that time. It was a community of 22 to 25,000 people. And it was the city and sister city to San Francisco. And you know your Nevada history, and it was a very important resource in history of Nevada and what it contributed. I always look at it as kind of the technology center of its time, with all the type of underground mining, ancillary services, and structures that had to be developed. But also, it was a place of education. If they had 11 public schools and 3,000 school children at the time, education was important. There was a school in every ward. A ward at the time was a voting and fire precinct. And so there was a school in the first ward, which is called the First Ward School, et cetera. That's why it's called the Fourth Ward School, because it was in the Fourth Ward voting district. And so when there was a hotel there that burned in 1876 in June. So the school district decided that would be a place to build the new school. But by that time, with the fire in the year before, they really needed to also house some more elementary school children. So this hotel burnt, and the school district bought the property and constructed the Fourth Ward School within 6 months. 18,000 square foot building, and all the wood, of course, came around from down the hill from Lake Tahoe. But to do that, they not only needed money from the school district and the county, but also from the private sector. And so many businesses, of course, mining companies, but also private individuals, as well as a number of balls and raffles and all sorts of things from individuals in the community to help finance the construction of this school. And what they built was a 4-story wooden school building based on Second Empire architectural style, because they were showing off and they wanted to build something big and beautiful that they could be proud of. And it was also the year of the centennial, nation's centennial, so it was a gift to the nation to prove their success in Nevada. Well, the school got constructed. Not everything got finished, but they needed the space. So by January of 1877, they were occupying the building. And by the time it closed in 1936, it was no longer one of 11 schools. It was the school, because the population by that time had declined. It was never a ghost town in Virginia City, but obviously did not have that population. When it closed, a number of reasons that it did close. Mainly because there was a federal fire code against school-age children going to a 4-story wooden school structure. There had been some horrific fires in Ohio and Indiana, Illinois, in schools just like that. So they needed to close it anyway. Well, with the decreased population, they had their choice of where they wanted to build a new school. And they chose where our middle school is today. And the new schools, just like our elementary schools today, are all one level, usually made out of concrete block. And that's because of that early federal fire code and the dangers in those multi-story wooden school buildings. But instead of tearing the Fourth Ward School down like they would in any other school district where they only have a fixed amount of property, they just abandoned it. And it sat there for 50 years before a museum was started in 1986. But during those 50 years, the building weathered many bad winters, pigeons getting in the top floor, depositing 3 feet of guano. A couple windows blew in, but no vandalism. The building was revered. The local painters unions painted it in the 50s. And then in the 1960s, the Virginia City Historic District was created, and a commission was created to govern the historic properties in Virginia City. And you remember the climate of the nation at that time. That's when a lot of our preservation acts were passed or initiated, which continued mainly into the 1980s. So with that, and I have to look at my timeline, and it's ironic that Susan invited me to be on this panel at this time, because I am retiring at the end of the year. And so with my predecessor, she needs, or my successor, she needs to know all this corporate history. So it's a good review for me. So during that time, they did many feasibility studies, of course, which you know we always do over and over again, about what to do with not only the Fourth Ward School, but what to do on the Comstock with these old buildings that bit by bit are falling down. And so at one point, they formed a partnership in the 1980s with the county, some state funding, and also, once again, Painters and Carpenters Union stepped up to the plate, as well as the residents of Virginia City to help preserve the building. They weren't going to open it. They were just trying to preserve it. And they talked about, well, what could we do with it? And they decided the least favorite idea would be a museum. And so, ironically, that is what happened. But the feasibility for a museum, they didn't think was even possible because so many things needed to happen. One of those would be a fire sprinkler suppression system. Well, you know, in Nevada, we're very creative. So Joe Conforti, who was a Story County native, who contributed a lot to this ongoing preservation of the building, asked Jack Daniels, the liquor company, if they would donate a certain percentage of their Nevada sales during 1 month to the Fourth Ward School to pay for a fire sprinkler system, which they did. And that's how we have our fire sprinkler system. And then in 1985, with the help of the Virginia City Historic District, we started with one room. They decided that we needed an interpretive center in Virginia City for our local history because tourism was starting to increase. Of course, you remember, some of you in the room are old enough to remember Bonanza, or maybe those of you that are younger watch it repeatedly anyway on the reruns. But there was a surge of tourism in the 1960s because of Bonanza. At a time where so many of the buildings were collapsing, it really did help the economy, and that's when there was a real shift in Virginia City to tourism, and which is our main resource today. So, but this continued, and then there was an increase in bus tours, and they decided they needed an interpretive center, and that they started with one room with programming money from Nevada Humanities. And we still have that same exhibit. It's been tweaked a little bit and upgraded, but it's the Comstock lesson. So bit by bit, we have restored each room. But it's because of many public-private partnerships that we've been able to do that. In 1989, the legislators were looking around for examples of state funding for cultural properties. And Jim, you mentioned some of these revenue streams. And there was one operating in Washington, mainly in the Seattle area, which provided a bond, 10-year bonding system for their cultural buildings. And so by 1991, Nevada legislators had passed a 10-year bonding program called the Commission of Cultural Affairs. So with that, that created a big impetus to help our cultural buildings that would be serving as a cultural center. Virginia City was lucky at that time to have an active Historic District Commission and also a very concerned historic preservation officer in the Comstock, and it was the seat of so much Nevada history. So in 1993, we received some major funding from this Commission of Cultural Affairs, and we went on to receive quite a bit of money from the Commission for the whole 10 years of its bonding cycle. Along with that, we were able to partner or use that money as matching funds for such federal programs as Save America's Treasures. And the Fourth Ward became a poster child in many cases for a lot of the other structures in Nevada. And we have been fortunate to have very concerned citizens, very concerned commissioners with the county as well as the Historic District, and as I mentioned, a very concerned State Historic Preservation Office. And once again, there was public partnership, there were involved citizens, people that lived there that wanted to save that building, that revered it, and it symbolizes so much of a 19th century Western community that's concerned with more than just driving cattle or having gunfights or whatever, that it was really this immigration of people that wanted to find a new life, but still brought all their cultural baggage with them and created this wonderful city and this wonderful school building. We have been very fortunate too in our programming to receive money from Nevada Arts Council, as well as Nevada Humanities and Nevada Commission on Tourism, because once again, it's, as Jim mentioned too, it's all about marketing and finding people that you can express your passion to about your particular organization. And you have to have some type of, they have to have a reason or a hook to be involved with a building, especially such as a Fourth Ward school, because it's not a cure for cancer. It doesn't help abused families in any way. And so how do you help preserve the building, but also provide relevant programming within the building that also portrays our mission? And we're mission driven at the Fourth Ward. And it has changed over time, and as you probably know in your own organizations, you have to do that periodically. It's review your mission and your vision, and we're very happy for what we've been able to achieve, but there's been some very nail-biting times with the recession in particular, because tourism obviously waned quite a bit, especially up on the hill. And we have been fortunate through those times to have the county support. We do get a yearly county stipend because they still own the building. A nonprofit, which I'm the director of the nonprofit Historic Fourth Ward School Foundation, was created by my predecessor, Mark Price, in 2000. He had been a county employee before that, and he saw the benefit of creating, he and the board, of creating a nonprofit. So we've been a nonprofit since 2000. But we are charged with the maintenance and the preservation of the building, as well as the operation of the museum. But their stipend goes towards the maintenance mainly of the building, because any monies that we have received as a nonprofit have become an asset, not for the foundation, but for the county, for the building. So it's kind of an interest. We can't claim that asset. But that's part of the benefit of being the nonprofit too, which you probably understand all that more than I do.
You got it down very well.
So as Nevadans, we should be proud, because in 2004, Nevada received a National Honor Award for preserving the Fourth Ward School and for its adaptive reuse from the National Trust of Historic Places. It's very hard for us Westerners to get to be recognized for some of our buildings, because they're not very old when we're compared to some of the structures back east. And many of people have said, well, you know, Virginia City is the Williamsburg of the West. Well, to me, it's better than Williamsburg because it's not a reconstruction. It's all authentic. And I think authenticity is one thing that we're always looking for as tourists too. And you walk into the Fourth Ward School and you have that true, and it's very cliche, step back in time, but you do, because all the finishes are real. You see the wear of the children, footsteps walking up and down the stairs, down the aisles. They left scuff marks on the banister when they slid down it on their leather shoes. And so you do get a sense of those early days. And I don't know how many times people have come into the building from all over the world. It's amazing how many international visitors we get, and they're not just there for Bonanza. And I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I see that you kind of cheered with Bonanza. Little Joe did not go to school at the Fourth Ward.
And he didn't ride there.
Yeah, no, he did not. But I mean, it was so wonderful to see your response to so many visitors in the room to the Fourth Ward School, and I hope you'll come back. One of the challenges also in funding, besides creating all these private public partnerships with the various state entities and with the federal monies from the national parks, for example, and also on the local level with the county. But as you know, if you operate a nonprofit, you're always fundraising. And my board president is born and raised in Virginia City. Actually, he was born in Reno, which really bothers him. But he was raised in Virginia City. His parents went to the Fourth Ward School. His great-grandfather died in the Yellow Jacket fire. and his grandfather was the janitor at the Fourth Ward School, so he has a real connection to it. And he is always going out and putting his arm around people and telling them about the Fourth Ward. And I tease him that he is the head pimp for the Fourth Ward School. And I hope I don't offend anybody by saying that, but really, when you're marketing, you're more or less doing that because you're trying to sell your package. I just want to. So one of the fundraisers that I stole, always look around and see what everybody else is doing, and this came from a community county in California. It's where I do a number of kind of exclusive parties. I call them parties of the year, and I make a cute little booklet, and everybody wants the little booklet, and I try to take advantage of other local resources to help promote other partners, whether it's St. Mary's Art Center or another venue in Virginia City, but also in Reno and Lake Tahoe and down in Douglas County, just to help people get into these different venues. And I team them or pair them with different more or less gourmet meals, and usually they're based around history or some historic activity that you can relate, and I recommend it. It's not an easy thing to do, but I'll be happy to share it with you one-on-one if anyone's interested. But once again, it takes a party host that's willing to donate either their home or finances for the meal for sponsorship. And this is our 10th year, and it's been very successful in fundraising for us on not a huge money making, but when you need about $20,000 for something to help you with operating expenses or ongoing preservation, it's one little pot there that you have to depend on. And so that's my journey, that's my story, and I'll take it over.
What is the population of Virginia City right now?
Right now, it's about 1,500 in the city, not the county, but in the city.
Does everybody know who Joe Conforti is? Would you like to describe?
You may have more backstory on this than I do.
Well, yeah, I do, but I wouldn't be discussing it in this arena. And I think we are live streaming. But again, it's those moments of opportunity when you find someone who shares your passion and you make sure that you're in sync, you work with them, because in the end, if you go back, I think what we're going to find with all the speakers and all the panels during today and tomorrow, that everyone is going to have some recurring themes. Mm-hmm. So you might be talking about remixing, you may be talking about borrowing, and you may be talking about creative strategy, and you might be talking about leadership, and how you lead from behind, or how you have leadership of compassion. And I think Joe Conforti, in his own way, would be the compassionate leader, albeit now no longer living in the United States. But he cared about his community and cared about this facility, mm-hmm. and I think that's really important. And I really appreciate your presentation and coming down here.
You're welcome. And it always takes an army.
It takes
an army.
It takes an army. 1,500 people.
Mm-hmm.
And our wrap-up, who's going to be wrapping up this conversation, actually, we'll see. Oh, you've changed it to what hotel? I thought it was what motel. So we have all these facilities, and we have these partnerships, we have these alliances, we have these historic buildings, we have these contemporary buildings. But in what environment are we placing them in? And what is the environment in which we live, in which we do business? What's the environment that we promote to attract new businesses, new tourists? What do we feel about ourselves when we walk in our own community, whether it's small or large? And what is that vision of our community, whether it's small or large? to the outsider. It has to do with design, it has to do with architecture, and I think Eric Strain is going to bring us back home to talk about really the substance of what hotel do we really live in.
Thanks, Susan. I've been back in Las Vegas for 25 years now. I still travel, and I get asked this question constantly, and it always amazes me, the impression that people have outside of Las Vegas, that we all live in a hotel, and that Las Vegas is just that 7-mile strip. I remember my ex-wife, the first time I brought her to Vegas, she wanted to see a place where somebody lived other than a hotel. She wanted to see a place where people shopped other than Frederick's. And she wanted to see a place where you ate other than the buffet. And so Nevada, Las Vegas, we have this built impression through the media of who we really are. And it's really not the authentic version of who we are and what we try to get back to in our everyday work. When people talk about the lights of Las Vegas, they talk about the strip and the neon. We like to talk about the sunsets and the way that the 110-degree heat radiates off a desert floor. That to us is what makes us very unique and special. People talk about Las Vegas, that we lack culture. It reminds me of the time I was in Boston and they were having what they described as the cultural event of the season. They found out that I was from Las Vegas. The cultural event of the season was the Blue Man Group was performing. And they proceeded to tell me that I had no culture in Las Vegas. And I told them that I had Blue Man twice a night, 5 nights a week. It all goes to how you view your surroundings and how you take that in. When we talk about water in Las Vegas, we talk about the fountains. We talk about, the strip and how we use water. We look at the water as a very precious resource. How do we use and respect the idea of water? There's a famous quote, I believe it was the mayor of Denver, back in the early 50s, who said, I don't remember the exact quote, but it was something like, the only women that are in Nevada are prostitutes and showgirls. We're here to tell you that we actually have families in Nevada. We have families that live, we have families that actually don't work on the strip. We have mothers that aren't showgirls. And we have a history in Las Vegas. We have a history that is actually authentic. It's not an imported history from around the world. It's authentic to who we are and how we started. Those are the kind of issues that we look at as we're working on projects. One of probably our most important projects was the Mesquite Art Center. We were commissioned to do the project. Mesquite had just recently finished their new city hall. It was done by actually a friend of mine up in Salt Lake, Eric Migox. Mesquite had just passed a new ordinance. They had brought in a planner from Southern California to write their design guidelines for Mesquite. And he talked about, it was a 2-part document. The first part of the document talked about the history of Mesquite, the founding of Mesquite, and really the sense of place of what Mesquite was. The second part of the document defined the guidelines. And you read where Mesquite was founded, and one of the honors that Mesquite has is that the pomegranate was one of the first World's Fair winning entries, and it was raised right there in Mesquite. When you read that, it sounds like a great place, and then you read the design guidelines, and it tells you everything should be white stucco, everything should be red tile, everything should have an arch. We were fortunate that the art group that we were with didn't want us to abide by those guidelines. They wanted us to look at what Mesquite really was, what its founding was, what the real sense of that place was. And the location of the Mesquite Arts Center was right next to this building. That was created back in the 1940s or 50s. It was actually built by the citizens of Mesquite. It started with the children that would bring the rocks from the local river that would form. If you look at the structure up to the window line, you'll see a certain size of rock. That was a rock that the average child could carry from the river up to the location. When the project was abandoned, now the adults took it over and the adults could carry much larger rocks. So you saw that datum line in the building and that cultural change that they carried on. We felt it was much more important to respond to this structure than it was to the white stucco and red tile. We started with the idea that a building should be about its place. It should come from that place. It should be built from that place. And building upon that structure, we felt it should be made of that place. So we originally started with the idea of rammed earth and core-tin steel that would start to age and then be part of the community over a lifetime. When we first presented it to the city turned it back to us and refused to review the documents because it wasn't white stucco and red tile. We actually resigned from the project, and the city then met with us and we came to an agreement of how we should proceed with the project. We redesigned the structure. The night before we were to present it to City Hall, I received a phone call from an individual in Mesquite that informed me that the city manager was going to fire us at city council meeting, publicly embarrass us because of the attitude that we had about what Mesquite was. So we decided if we were going to go out, we were going to go out in flames. And we completely redesigned the building again that night, took it up under cover. We didn't even let our clients see the project. When it was our turn to present, I saw the city manager was sitting at the end of the table, ready to publicly embarrass me and fire me. But he allowed us to make our presentation. So we started talking about that history of Mesquite, that forming of that community, that building of that structure, the farms of Mesquite, where those came from, how that changed that community. And when we got done with the presentation, the city manager stepped up to talk, and one of the council members, I can't remember, I wish I could remember the councilman, stopped him in his tracks and made a motion immediately to approve the design, that this was the most unique and authentic Mesquite structure that had ever been presented to them, and that we should immediately approve that. And I still remember the blood vessel in the city council's neck continued to just pulse, and his face was turning red. One of the other council members went to make the second with the idea that we would rethink the signage of the building, and I was more than happy to rethink the signage, and it passed unanimously. The structure received several awards, and each time it received awards, the city manager became much more enthused about the project, to the point at the grand opening, it was his building, and it was his idea to do this all along. The best part about this project was really what it showed us to what architecture and what that sense of place and design can mean to a community. During the course of construction, it's probably the first and only time I've ever been in the editorial pages. Each week there was several letters from the local community complaining about the structure, that it was the most godforsaken thing they'd ever seen in their life. And then the next week would be the other side telling them that this was the greatest thing that Mesquite had ever done, And for us, it was amazing to see this one small little structure have that kind of an impact on the community. At the grand opening, after the presentations and the mayor and the city council, and they did their thing, there were two great grandmothers in the main lobby of the space, nose to nose, screaming at each other. One saying it's the worst thing, they can't believe Mesquite, that my tax dollars went to this is ridiculous. The other woman telling her how wonderful it was. The security came up to me and asked, you know, should we break this up? And I threw him out of the building, like, do not touch them, let them continue to argue. This was the greatest thing we'd ever seen. Today, the building now has started to age. It started to show that the original ideas that we had gone after of how should a building really represent and be part of that community. The silo is no longer there. They took that down, I guess, a couple of years ago. This was, we had planned all along for the silo. It was in the back of the building. Unfortunately, it was the very first thing that the contractor put on the site, and so that's what started all the editorial comments that they couldn't believe that we were putting a silo in downtown Mesquite. But the idea behind it was a beacon, that we had turned the silo upside down, and that the night of events, the night of openings, the lights inside would then cast up, and you got that ring around the silo that would signal something was going on at the Art Center that night. One of the other projects we were able to work on was with the state parks and with the State Public Works to do the old Las Vegas Mormon Visitor Center. And it was interesting for us to kind of come back and do this, because Las Vegas really doesn't have a sense of history. As Dave Hickey talks about, the reason that we don't respect history is you can't bet on it. So why should we give a damn about history? Because there's no money in it. We have a tendency to blow things up in Las Vegas. So this project gave us an opportunity to bring back some of that early culture, early history, and that founding of what really started Las Vegas. It started, top of the screen was the original Mormon fort. We were given this site just down the hill from there to put the new visitor center. And the state really gave us pretty much free rein. They didn't dictate to us through policy what the design had to be. They were very willing to let us explore what it meant to be a fort. So it started with this idea that the fort were these 4 outer walls, these very secure walls that then held the function within inside itself. So that's where the initial conceptual idea came from, was this idea that these very rugged walls would contain you and keep you out. And then once you came in, you got to see the function and the reality of what the fort was all about. Again, we played with the idea of letting the materials age and weather with the creation of the space. And then brought a little bit of new technology in to kind of to set our current time and place. I mean, we're very respectful of the past. We don't want to try to mimic the past. We don't want to replicate the past in a stage set, but we still want to pay homage to it while we still respect the current day and who we are today. So the mechanical system was a new invention that had come up at that time. It's actually a duct that's made out of fabric that kind of expands and contracts with the amount of air that's put out. But the whole part of the project too was to bring back the idea of the fort, the wood nature of the fort, how they built what they were able to build, the materials they had to build the fort out of. So it really comes back to how do you look at that sense of authenticity? What does it mean to be of that place, to respect that place, and ultimately to be very proud of that place? I had no desire to come back to Las Vegas when I left. I swore to God I would never come back to that hellhole. And today I wouldn't live anywhere else. It is part of who we are, it's part of our work, and it's how we want to leave a history of Las Vegas outside of what the Strip is. So we're constantly looking for what we think it means to be authentic.
May I finish just a moment? I'm from Mesquite. When
Sorry.
people ask, where's that city hall? We say, across the street from the museum. Thank you.
Thank you.
Obviously, you had much public input in Mesquite, part of the public-private partnership. And partnerships and alliances, this is why I'm using the word alliance, because it has to do with a conversation, it has to do with a dialogue, and it never stops. It's always an ongoing discourse. When you, the Mormon Fort, I think part of that also received Commission for Cultural Affairs funding, the historic part. I know we're running a little bit late, but I wondered if you could talk just a little bit about how arts organizations and artists and people in this room, and we have representatives from chambers of commerce, and we have city workers, we have individual artists, we have patrons, we have educators. How can they help the design professionals and architects develop communities, public spaces that really respond to the needs, to reflect the, to find the authenticity of that neighborhood or that community, and honor the past, obviously, like you have done with this historic Mormon fort, but also acknowledge that we are living in the 21st century. And if you can answer that, I guess you could run for office.
Thanks. I think it really comes down to, I think it comes down to not losing the soul of who we are. That I think there's an opinion out there that somebody from outside your city will understand your city and can do things for your city, design things for your city, look at your city better than you can as a local. And when an out-of-town firm comes in, they're given a latitude that local firms usually aren't given. That's where we need to change things. We need to start developing our own creative talent, respecting the creative talent that we have as a state, and not being ashamed to say no. That we had a panel discussion a few weeks ago. A gentleman from LACMA was in, and one of his statements, the Los Angeles Museum of Contemporary Art, is that what it, okay. And the statement that rang very true to me was, Las Vegas will never be taken serious until we have a major work of architecture created by a Las Vegas architect. And I think it's true. We have work of art on the Strip, and then we have the major cultural facilities that they tend to go out of town for. And we continue to put down and say we don't have local talent, we don't have local designers that can handle that. And I think as a community, architecture, art organizations need to come up and start educating politicians and the public sector that there are amazing talents within the state of Nevada. And until we respect those talents, nobody else is going to respect those talents. And we need to start developing that attitude if we want Nevada to really be authentic.
I want to thank our three panelists our wonderful panelists. Obviously, they have so much more to share with you. Is there anybody that has a question, a burning question that?
Just one comment. I want to tie it to the Bob Dylan reference.
Okay.
And I want to quote his best lyric, and it's a lot to do with what Eric's example displayed. In not following what others expect or dictate. And it's to live outside the law, you must be honest. And I think that's a key trait for a leader. So Eric, I think you demonstrated.
To live outside the law, you must be honest, and that's a key trait of a leader.
No, I don't. I have nothing to do with it. I just borrowed.
Do we have any more comments or questions? I want to thank everybody today for joining us. We have, do I have any other housekeeping? We have maps. Maps to get to the reception at the Liberty Fine Art Gallery, which is right next to the Nevada Museum of Art. It is the Art Walk. Enjoy yourself. Thank you so much for being here. We start promptly at 8:30 tomorrow morning. Breakfast is at 7:30.
Feel like that's what you want.